On this episode of Ranger Talks to Go, you'll learn how altitude changes the inner workings of your body, from your brain to your muscles and even your taste. So get ready, because this is Ranger Talks to Go.
Ranger Talks to Go. Ranger Talks to Go. Ranger Talks to Go. Ranger Talks to Go. Ranger Talks to Go.
Embarking on a journey at Pikes Peak, America's mountain, means you're about to climb from 7,800 feet at the gateway to 14,115 feet at the summit in a relatively short amount of time. That's nearly 7,000 feet of elevation gain in just a 19-mile drive. For some visitors, gaining elevation that quickly isn't much of a problem. But for others, the thinner air makes its presence known pretty quickly. But before we talk about what happens to your body up here, we need to pause for a quick message from our sponsor.
Do you ever feel tired, sluggish, just not like yourself?
Well, we got a solution for you. Try water.
At higher elevations, your body loses water faster than you might expect. The air is much drier. Every breath you take carries moisture away from your body. But one simple sip can help you feel better, think clearer, and keep the adventure going.
Drink water, and drink it often.
Side effects may include increased energy, improved health, and looking for the bathroom. Find a water bottle refill station in the gift shop at the Summit Visitor Center.
With that hydration reminder, let's all take a quick sip of our water. Alright, as you climb towards the summit of Pikes Peak, you might start noticing your body feeling a little different around tree line. Tree line marks the point where environmental conditions like strong winds, colder temperatures, and limited moisture become too harsh for trees to survive. Above this point, the landscape changes dramatically, and so does the air. By the time you reach the summit of Pikes Peak, the air contains only about 60% of the oxygen that would be available at sea level. That means your body has to work harder just to do the same things it normally does. If you find yourself huffing and puffing while climbing the stairs inside the Summit Visitor Center, don't worry, everyone else is probably doing that too. The reason for your breathlessness comes down to how your body reacts to lower oxygen levels. At high elevations, low air pressure means less oxygen is available in every breath you take. To compensate, your body starts making adjustments almost immediately. Your lungs begin to breathe faster and deeper, trying to pull in more oxygen. At the same time, your heart rate increases to move that oxygen through your body more quickly. In fact, your heart can beat 10 to 30% faster at high altitude as it works to deliver enough oxygen to your muscles and organs. That extra pitter-patter you might feel in your chest, that's your body working to adapt to its new environment. Taking things slow and staying hydrated can make the adjustment much easier. In some cases, you may experience altitude sickness, especially if you're coming from much lower elevations. Common symptoms can include headaches, nausea, dizziness, extreme fatigue, or feeling a little disoriented. The most effective treatment for altitude sickness is surprisingly simple. Head down to a lower elevation and hydrate. An advantage to driving Pikes Peak is that you can take your time heading up the mountain and check in with how you're feeling along the way. Sometimes, though, your body just can't quite figure out what's going on, and for some people, they may start to really feel the effects of altitude. That's why we followed the first principle of leave no trace and planned ahead when we built the new Summit Visitor Center, making sure to include an on-site EMT station. During operating hours, emergency medical technicians are stationed at the summit and available to help visitors at no cost who may not be feeling their best. If you head towards the back of the gift shop, you'll find them ready to assist. One of the first places many people notice the effects of altitude is in the brain. With less oxygen available, the brain receives slightly less of the fuel it normally depends on. This can affect blood flow and brain chemistry, which is why headaches, slower thinking, or mood changes sometimes occur at high elevation. Feeling a little foggy, giggly, or even a bit irritable, that could be the altitude having a subtle effect on your brain chemistry. It can be a part of the experience, but it's helpful to be aware of, especially if you're traveling with friends or family, or if you're the one behind the wheel. Just something to keep in mind while you're driving the mountain. Your brain's not the only thing dealing with the oxygen challenge. Because oxygen plays a key role in producing energy, reduced oxygen means muscles fatigue more quickly. That's why something simple, like walking to one of the overlooks on the summit, can suddenly feel like a mini workout. Your body is still capable of doing the same things, it just has to work harder to do them, which actually makes one particular mountain tradition especially impressive. Every year since 1956, athletes have raced to the summit of America's Mountain during the Pikes Peak Marathon and Ascent. In 1993, runner Matt Carpenter set the marathon course record at 3 hours, 16 minutes, and 39 seconds. Running 26.2 miles up and down a 14,000-foot mountain is an incredible feat, especially when you consider the effects altitude has on the human body. During the summer months, you might even spot runners training near Devil's Playground at mile 16 or around the summit as they prepare for race day. Incredible stuff. Do you think that's something you could ever do? Personally, I prefer a slightly different summit activity. You know, something a little more tasty, like snacking on a Pikes Peak famous high-altitude donut. And that raises an interesting question. Did you know altitude can actually affect how things taste? At high elevations, people often experience a slight reduction in their ability to taste sweet and salty flavors. Scientists believe this happens because the dry air and lower oxygen levels affect both your taste buds and your sense of smell. Which leads to an important philosophical question. Has anyone ever truly tasted a Pikes Peak donut? Maybe, maybe not. One thing we do know is that the donut recipe here is specially crafted for 14,115 feet, and that has everything to do with how they're made. At this altitude, the air pressure is lower, which changes the way dough behaves. Things rise faster, moisture evaporates quicker, and recipes that work perfectly at sea level can fall flat up here. Literally. So the donuts on Pikes Peak are made with that in mind. Take that same recipe down the mountain, where the air pressure is higher, and suddenly everything changes. Up here, our donuts aren't just a treat, they're perfectly adapted to high altitude conditions. And believe it or not, some of you might be a little more high altitude adapted too. If you're a local to the state, then you may have a slight advantage up on Pikes Peak. Not so surprisingly, visitors from Colorado or other high elevation places may notice fewer issues with the altitude. That's because the human body can actually adapt to living at altitude over time. Colorado Springs itself sits at about 6,000 feet above sea level, where oxygen levels are 21% lower than they are if you came from the coast. Over time, people living at higher elevations often develop more red blood cells to carry oxygen, larger lung capacity, and improved efficiency in how their bodies use oxygen. It's an impressive example of how adaptable the human body can be. Of course, humans aren't the only ones navigating life up here. One of the animals you might spot while visiting Pikes Peak is the Rocky Mountain bighorn sheep. They're incredibly well adapted to live life at high elevations. To survive in this environment, their bodies are built to capture and use oxygen with extreme efficiency. Bighorn sheep have large, powerful lungs that allow them to take in more air with every breath. Inside those lungs are millions of tiny air sacs where oxygen moves into the bloodstream. Because their lungs are so efficient, they're able to pull more oxygen out of each breath. Once that oxygen enters the bloodstream, the heart takes over. Bighorn sheep have strong cardiovascular systems, meaning their hearts pump oxygen-rich blood quickly and proficiently to the muscles that power their climbs. This steady circulation helps their bodies keep working even when the oxygen in the air is limited. Their blood also helps them thrive at altitude. Like many animals that live high in the mountains, bighorn sheep have blood that is especially good at binding and transporting oxygen, ensuring their muscles and organs still receive the fuel they need. All of these adaptations work together to support the sheep's incredibly active lifestyle. Because surviving in the mountains isn't just about breathing, it's about moving. Bighorn sheep regularly navigate steep cliffs and rocky slopes. Their powerful muscles rely on a steady supply of oxygen to climb, leap, and sprint across terrain that would leave most of us completely out of breath. Even though they look incredibly tough on the outside, their bodies are finely tuned for survival in extreme environments. That's why it's important to never approach or feed them. Extra stress from people can push their already hardworking bodies too far. So as you make your way towards the summit of America's Mountain, remember to listen to your body. Take your time, stay hydrated, and give yourself a little grace as your body adjusts to the altitude. We want you to enjoy the views, but even more importantly, we want you to stay safe. Thanks for tuning in to Ranger Talks to Go. Check out our other episodes to learn more about Pikes Peak and subscribe so you're the first to know when new talks drop. And if you've got young adventurers along for the ride, be sure to check out Junior Ranger Talks to Go for some family learning fun. Until next time, Peak Pals, hope to learn again with you soon. Signing off for now.
Talks to Go.